If you like recording podcasts. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Sarah Report.
Hey, everybody.
And after last week's episode, I've decided I kind of want a Madam Secretary a little bit. And maybe we do like a huge opening before we reveal to people that they're listening to the Say Report. Obviously, that didn't work this time.
I believe that's called a cold open, my friend.
Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Say Report. I'm one of your host companions, Devin Decker.
And I am your other host companion, Sejan Sarwick.
And I don't think Sejan would disagree with me if I said a bunch of shit happened between the last episode we recorded and the episode we are currently recording.
Yeah, actually, like a weird amount of crap has gone down. Yeah.
I mean, specifically just in our lives. If stuff happened in the outside world, I've missed it.
Oh yeah, no. We've been too busy with our own shit. Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Say Report, a show about everything, and we're going to talk about all the crazy stuff that went down in our lives. And I'm trying to think where we start. The beginning is probably a good start, but
It's a pretty good place to start.
But I'm trying to think of what has happened since the last time we recorded. We talked about Shah-Zam a lot.
But not for any type of recording. You mean linked just together? Yeah.
No. Our whole last episode was about Shah-Zam.
Oh,
it was called the Shah-Zam Report.
Because we've also talked a lot off air about Shah-Zam now.
Right.
Because...
Yes, but I think that you saw the movie, so what a wonderful place. Like, it's kind of like last time on the Say Report, I hate Shazam. We join this week's episode already in progress.
I hate Shazam.
Yes, so it's no longer just one man's opinion. It is now the opinion of the Say Report. Shazam is a bad, terrible, awful movie.
All right, and now is the time for the dial back. I don't hate Shazam. Like, we've talked about this before. There's plenty of room in the world for a movie that does not suit me, right? The thing is that I've got nothing really to add, and I'm glad that we did talk a little bit last week, because my opinion, summed up, is exactly what I said to you, Devin. I feel the same way about Shazam that I have about every other DC movie that's come out in the last, 5 years. I feel like there was a lot of weird stuff that didn't need to happen that really turned me off.
I really do not understand why that woman whose face was just unpleasant to look at had to die when she knocked on Shazam's door.
There's no reason to be shitty about this actress.
I feel like she's like, that's just, it was so distracting. And I feel bad saying that. Like, I like her as an actress. I've seen her in other things, but I felt like it was gonna mean something more. Like, maybe she had been touched by the sins or something.
They made her character-y. That's what they did. Is they took this person and made them pop out from the rest of the people in the background because she only had 2 lines before they fucking kill her for no reason.
Like, and so what I think,
they made her character-y.
They made her character. You're right, and that's a problem for me. Is that, like, we're gonna force some brief characterization on this woman so that when we fridge her, which DC still fridging ladies.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus, fridging for no reason at this point. I guess for bad.
No, not even for bad. Because the door that she touched.
No, for Thad, I said.
Oh, for Thad. I'm sorry.
Like, I'm trying to figure out who he... Because, like, fridging implies that it's then, like, it implicitly affects a male's story, and I guess I didn't think about it, but I guess Thad would be the one that it... Yeah. Yeah. Keep going.
The story that it affects is Shazam the Wizard, played by Jimon Hansu. I can say his name now. And the fact that she basically knocks on the door to the Rock of Eternity, and his response is, "And now you're dead.
I don't know who you are, stranger. Die.
How dare you knock at this, the place where I judge everyone as unworthy of my power."
Is this before or after Billy has been to visit him?
It is.
I can't remember.
It is before.
So he is literally in there. It's like
he's literally just like sitting there. He's probably watching Netflix,
He has the
And
ability to make that not happen, though. It's like that's what I mean. Like he can keep an eye on that door. There's no reason for it to have a death curse on it.
there's no reason for it to have a death curse on it. I mean,
Yeah.
regardless of whether or not the wizard Shazam is at the Rock of Eternity, that is not the way that a hero should comport himself.
Well, so
Batman,
that's a question that I had, I guess. Are we supposed to understand that Shazam not Jimon Hansu's Shazam, Wizard Shazam? Are we supposed to believe that he is maybe not like great?
that's what it
Because
made me think. I need to tell you, I was super into the movie during that whole immensely cool opening.
dark opening, disturbing opening, unnecessary opening. Okay, sure.
And no, but then like so the dark, disturbing, unnecessary opening, and then the introduction to Billy Batson, where he steals a Geno's cheesesteak, which between Pat's and Geno's is the better cheesesteak. But if you want a good cheesesteak, and I mean if you want the best cheesesteak, you go to Jim's at 400 South Street in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
We're drawing a line in the sand on this one.
That is the best cheesesteak. That's where Hall & Oates go for cheesesteak.
And there you go.
And they're the Philly sound. That song, Sarah Smile, smiling because she ate a Jim's cheesesteak.
Oh God.
She's a rich girl because her papa owns Jim's cheesesteak.
Are we doing this?
No,
what are we doing?
No. So like that whole thing is wonderful, and then they jump to this scene that is just distracting. That whole thing about like Thaddeus from the shadows supporting a like research project into mass hallucinations.
Oh my God, there's so much bullshit. It's honestly, it's like listening to any scene with Lex Luthor in Batman versus Superman. So much happens off screen that we don't see in his story that they have to like throw it at you immediately when he shows up on screen, just so that you understand any of the context for what's happening for him.
And right. And so you see like testimonials from people, and I'm like, what is this? I don't need trailers for the movie I'm already watching. It was bad enough when you gave me trailers for other movies in Batman v Superman. Yeah. I don't need summations of what Shazam is. Shazam. Yeah. And then, so we know that Jimon Hansu, Wizard Shazam, has been like, no one is worthy. And then he solves the mystery of the 7 symbols, which is Shazam! Exclamation point in old world like script language, right?
Yeah.
Let's call it Shazamese. And and he writes it on the door, and then she's like, this door will do nothing, and dead. And that woman is like, how dare you doubt the power of Shazam? Oh, so you're evil.
Yeah.
Like that's also, it's not a good test to be like, check out these statues. They're going to try to tempt you. Because you know how you solve that test? I don't listen to statues. If a statue tells me to do something, I'm like, fuck you, statue.
I also spent the entire time thinking there was going to be more about the brothers and sisters, like the Wizard Shazams, the rest of the council, and the fact that there were now these statues. I had this like, I don't know, this story in my head developing of like they had given in to these temptations and became these things, and like they were the old council. I don't know. I started putting a lot more depth on that movie than that movie had the entire time, because yeah.
That's an interesting thing that you bring up, because this is the end of Shazam talk for right now. As the world, I'm mad because Shazam won this weekend.
I mean, I'm not surprised, but yeah.
Well, I'm mad because another movie came out this weekend that I would have loved to see beat Shazam.
Well, of course.
And not just because it's kind of the same story as Shazam, but in a redder wrapping.
Yeah.
Oh, your suit's red? My skin is red. And we will talk about Hellboy at length later in this episode. But so that's what bothered me, is that it wasn't that good. And it is still this thing where my fears have been realized, because a lot of people are saying Shazam is finally the DC movie I wanted, and I'm like, no, I can't believe that you believe that. Who
I think it
hurt
is.
you?
I think it's on par with things like Suicide Squad and the like. Like, I don't understand what anybody's seeing in this movie that they haven't seen from DC already. I don't think anything has changed.
I think it's Zachary Levi. And that, so yeah, so Shazam talk. I have nothing further to say. You go listen to last week's episode, the Shah-Zam report, if you want to hear more of my thoughts. But Sejin, if there's anything you'd like to add before we triangle on to the next part of this last week's adventures.
Yeah, no, I just you had just mentioned that you were really worried that this was the way that DC was going to go going forward, and like I just want to say, like, as far as I can tell, this is what DC's been doing all along. So like, I don't think anything's going to change for DC. I think this is going to be the exact same formula that they keep using. They're going to keep going way too dark to prove that they can be darker than Marvel, and then they're going to go way too stupid to prove that they can be sillier than Marvel, because they want their cake and to eat it too. Right. So I don't know, man.
And you want to talk about going way too dark? Joker, which I finally saw a trailer for, dark.
Mm-hmm.
It's darker than the Dark Knight, and that's got dark in the title. It's darker than the Dark Knight Rises, and the villain was born in the shadows.
Yeah, I am. I'm excited to see what they do with that one in particular, because they can't go funny with it. Also, everybody involved with it, I don't know. There's a lot more appealing about that for me. The R rating has me. I mean, the fact that they're throwing any semblance of this being in the DC universe at the moment is completely appealing to me. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it looks awesome. But then, as I look back on that trailer, I think the only reason that it is not appropriate to be shown before Shazam, other than the R rating, like, because that right there says it. We don't want to be saying this is the next DC movie. But half of the people here, you're not invited. The most gruesome thing in that trailer is when he gets hit with his spinny sign.
Yeah. I think there is a clear moment where he's cutting into his mask that's supposed to be pretty vicious, and they just show it from the back. The other thing I noticed, because we saw the trailer at the same time, or not at the exact same time, but we saw the same trailer because we saw the one before Hellboy. The pacing on the trailer was odd, but then I had some feelings about the pacing in Hellboy, so I almost wonder if the pacing on whatever they had rolling was a little weird.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I'd like to, once we talk to Hellboy, I'd really like to delve a little deeper into your pacing issues.
Yeah.
But before that, I'm sorry, you
No. I was gonna do the exact same segue. You got on my segue.
That's fun. It's hard to have two people on a segue because it's all about like leaning your balance and body weight, but we've been doing this long enough that it's smooth sailing. I'm Devin Decker, and Devin Decker, you hear Devin Decker, you think certain things, and I'd like to hope that one of them is Zelda and its legend, the Legend of Zelda, if you will. And Devin,
is this going to be about Link to the Past again?
No, it's not going to be about Link to the Past again. What? Even though happy 27th anniversary in America, Link to the Past. No, we're going to be talking about something else today. We're going to be talking about Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link.
I'm in. Let's do it. Let's have this conversation. I was waiting for a Zelda 2 Electric Boogaloo joke, but you didn't go there.
I'm a little that when I said Zelda 2, you didn't jump in with Electric Boogaloo.
See, this is what we do. But now I got polite. I didn't want to jump on your segue.
You should have jumped. Definitely, it's fine. Like, what are we doing? We're already okay. So I saw. Okay, so I'd like to give a shout out to a podcast that sort of stumbled into my life. Oh my God, are we listening to Sarah Port Jr.? Am I Zach Sarowik right now? Right now?
That is what he sounds like.
And I want to play more Zelda. And in February, I got tagged on Twitter by a person that goes by the Ghost of Gamer Past. And I still am not sure why he tagged me on Twitter, but it was regarding Super Mario World.
Because he wants to visit you, Devin, and make you relive your gaming sins.
Look how much fun you had.
With Resident Evil. I don't know why I became Tom Hardy.
Because we talked of the shadows. But he tagged me in a Twitter post, and this guy, the Ghost of Gamer Past, who I don't know is anything more than that. He's from Canada. I don't think we've ever crossed paths in any way, shape, or form.
I don't think I know this person. Here he is listening to the show right now.
I would love it. I would absolutely love Ghost. If you listen, let us know, because I want to let you know. I want to tell you, I listened to all 20 episodes of your podcast, and I hope that this is just a hiatus and that you come back, because I have never been able to listen to a video game podcast before I started listening to the GOGP show.
Nice.
So I will give him that credit right here. And I'm recommending to everybody, it's out there on almost every platform. You can get it on iTunes. You can get it on Spotify. You can get it on last.fm, which I think that went away, though, because I think Spotify bought them.
Oh.
But yes, so he tagged me, and I followed him on Twitter after he tagged me, and at the end of last week, he put up a picture from Zelda 2 saying, is there any enemy in this game that isn't frustrating? And it was a red palace, and I have only ever seen the gray palace. So I'm like, you know what? If this guy is playing through the game, I can play through this game. It's time
Nice.
that I play through this game. And I started playing Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. And I was committed to finishing it. I'm like, this is not going to be like every other time I start this, where I get to Death Mountain and then I say, no, this is stupid. I hate this game. Turns out that once you get through Death Mountain, you get a hammer, and you never have to go to Death Mountain again. That hammer opens up the world of Zelda 2 in a way that I was never, ever aware of. And the only reason why Zelda 2 is universally hated, I have figured it out. I played the game. It took me about 5 days to complete. And I ended up not saving at the end, so I had to beat the final level twice in order to get a save game file. So that was fun, right? Oh, I've never beaten this game, and now I've beaten the final boss twice.
Fantastic.
The reason why that game does not work for people is not the diametric shift in the type of game that it is. Going from strictly top-down to top-down with side-scrolling action scenes. It's the second game in the series, right? And look at the difference between Super Mario Brothers and Super Mario Brothers 2. That's what they did. That's how they rolled at Nintendo. So it can't just be the shift. The big issue with that game is, unlike the first Zelda and every Zelda that came after Zelda 2, when you die in one of the dungeons, you do not continue at the beginning of the dungeon.
Okay, yeah, for sure. That would definitely be the thing that would fucking turn me off.
So every time you die, you have to walk the overworld again to get back to the dungeon, and it's random encounters.
I don't think I ever got far enough to notice that was a problem.
Well, you didn't, because you don't realize it's a problem until you get to the Great Palace, which is the final dungeon, and that one, when you die in it, you start at the beginning of the dungeon. So it feels like you're making the same type of progress. It stimulates your mental state and the dopamine release the same way that any other Zelda dungeon does. It's like, well, I already got this key, so I know that door is open. Or I went left when I could have gone right, and I died. So next time I get there, I will go right. That is what happens when you get to start from the beginning and actually are encouraged to explore and make mistakes.
Yeah.
When a mistake takes you all the way back to the beginning of the game, that is annoying. And if I had to point at the one glaring reason that game does not work, it is that. It is specifically that. and that's strange to say, but it is where I would put my finger and say, they fix this game would be wonderful. In fact,
It's a little Dark Soulsy in that sense, isn't it? Like,
well, so the reason why I think it's stuck in my head is I read a list of I read someone defending Zelda 2, and their thing is that people always say whenever you die you start at the beginning. That happens in Zelda 2, and that happens in Zelda as well. The original Zelda as well. To which I'm like, yeah, but that only happens if you're on the overworld. If you die in a dungeon, you start at the beginning of the dungeon.
yeah.
And that is not annoying. And maybe I'm wrong, but as far as I can remember, that's how it works. And I beat Legend of Zelda 3 times this year. So it's not like, oh, I remember as a kid you get to do this. No. It like rewards you for finding a dungeon.
Yeah.
And then you get to be in that dungeon until you say, fuck no, peace, I'll come back later. Or you say, I got my piece of Triforce, what's next?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not even Dark Soulsy in that, because in Dark Souls,
You still get the fireplaces.
you'd set a bonfire at the beginning of the dungeon.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, maybe you'd start back at the beginning, but you could go to your bonfire and warp to the dungeon you just died in.
Yeah.
So it like, even that would be something too. If when you get to it, even if you had to get to a certain place in each dungeon of Zelda 2 before it activated like a gateway in the palace where Zelda is sleeping to go back to that point in the game, in the dungeon,
Yeah.
that would be a game changer.
Yeah, and I think what it is I'm a little surprised nowadays with the ways that people really talk about wanting like challenges in that fashion, that idea of the hardcore game. Like, it's surprising that that is actually still a turnoff to people. And maybe this is it. Maybe this is the turning point, because now you've got like some dude defending it, and you sitting here talking about how much fun you had with it. Maybe this is the first rumblings of people having a renaissance on Zelda 2, because we do live in a world now where the idea of the challenge game is much more accepted. You know, and what's funny is I think it was once an acceptable way to make games, especially back in the arcade days, because they needed to be challenging in order to get you to feed quarters, right? But then that challenge kind of went away when the home market came around, because people wanted to be able to feel accomplished, I guess.
Yes and no. That went away when the rental market went away. Because Nintendo Hard, I believe we've discussed it before, maybe not here, maybe just off mic. And as I admitted to Zach yesterday, any conversation with you, I sometimes think is a Say Report episode. Because I'm like, well, you heard it in the Say Report, so I don't need to reiterate. And he's like, no, you've never talked about that on your show. And I'm like, oh, you're right. That was just a phone call Sejan and I had. But Nintendo Hard was Nintendo, and it's specifically a Western market thing, because if you play the Japanese version of a lot of games, they are so much easier than the American versions of games. Take, for example, Contra Spirits, Contra 3 in Japan.
Yeah.
You have unlimited continues, and regardless of your difficulty level, you get to play through the whole game. Where in America, you have 2 continues, regardless of what level you're playing on, and you only get to fight the final version of the boss on hard mode. And that's because they wanted to, A, add value to Western audiences. They felt like if people got a video game and played it once, they'd feel like they got ripped off.
Yeah.
But 2, it is because they didn't want someone to be able to go out, rent a game, and beat it. So that's why games are hard. That's why, and the other thing is, that's why like the first 3 levels of most games are hard. And then once you get past the 3rd level, you breeze through it.
Yeah.
It is because Nintendo being like, we want people to buy our games, not just rent
Yeah,
them.
yeah, we want that money.
But the actual issue is a lot of people were like, this game's too damn hard. Why would I want to buy it?
Right.
So that's why when emulation came along, a lot more of the Nintendo library got explored and understood, which is cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, man. I just I think that there's definitely people out there hungering for a game that has these challenging mechanics in it, shall we say? So it just seems like maybe Zelda 2 is ripe for the plucking right now.
Oh, it totally is. I mean, in fact, I was hanging out with some people today, and when I told them I beat Zelda 2, their response was, I would like another Zelda in that style. I think that the world is ready for it. To which I said, I agree, but the one change they need to make is if you die in a dungeon, you start at the beginning of that dungeon. Because the rest of the game can still be hard as balls.
Yeah.
There's still stuff on the overworld that you need to do that is frustrating, and you get a sense of accomplishment when you accomplish it. Like Death Mountain, as soon as I got that hammer, I cheered. But the dungeons, I mean, what dungeons have become to the Legend of Zelda series is a checkpoint in a lot of ways. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's just my 2 cents on Zelda 2.
No, man. I get that. I'll be very interested to see if they're ever willing to do something like that because, you know, they've put themselves in this weird position where they can pretty much do anything with the next game, right? And in fact, actually, what they are doing for the next game is pretty interesting. The remake of Link's Awakening, but even that doesn't feel like that's the next big Zelda, right? So so they've put themselves in this weird position where they can go anywhere. So I don't know, man. Maybe like a platformer, like, I don't know, racing game.
So, he's already shown up in Mario Kart.
Yeah,
and I don't think Nintendo
pilot.
would ever want to cannibalize the Mario Kart market, which is sad because Diddy Kong Racing is superior to Mario Kart 64.
That was a Rare
Come at me.
Right?
Yeah, it was. But it was when Rare was like in Nintendo's pocket. Nintendo. Yeah. Before Microsoft came over and was like, I also have $1 million. Let me be your sugar daddy.
And then they were just like, oh, we're going to kind of fall apart.
Yeah, because it turns out if all of your needs are taken care of by another person, you stop working. And that's what Rare did. Excited for Battletoads this year, though. Kind of.
Hey, Rare.
Because I would like to know what it's going to be.
Yeah.
All we know about it is that it's coming. And
just going to be a re-release of the old game.
That already happened.
Oh, and that stopped games from doing that again.
No, that's true. I would like it to be a re-release of the old game with modernized graphics. And everything else is still what it was. It's still hard as balls, but it's just like, now they're 3D pixels, ooh, which are called voxels. I know the terms before people get mad at me. Because I feel like that's going to be the one where they're like, nope. Not gonna happen.
Nerd card revoked.
Yeah. So that's the other thing I did. Do you have anything to add before I jump to the next thing that I did?
No, my week is gonna bookend this one, I think.
I love that. I think that's a wonderful way for this to progress. I finished Thief of Time.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And thank you very much for challenging me. Thank you for knowing exactly how to get under my skin. I just sat at the dining room table in my house and read that book in 3 sessions.
Nice.
And it was very enjoyable. Like, it did not feel like work. It took me away. But I also want to say, I started reading once every other soul in my house had gone to bed. Because otherwise, the distractions were just too plentiful. And I could not read.
Understood. Hey, man, I think that's the problem with reading. That I think it's part of the reason why it's gone by the wayside these days. But I think that there's so much other shit going on nowadays that like finding a quiet moment to read a book doesn't happen anymore.
That's true. I think it's also why on vacation, like when I take my vacation in May and go on a cruise, I usually can get through 2 or 3 books because I will just sit in my stateroom or sit in a deck chair and read, free from distractions, until like a band comes up playing steel drums. And it's like, I can't read with that.
I love this version of you that's like sitting somewhere on a deck chair and like sipping mai tais. I imagine in a Hawaiian shirt reading your book, and then this like steel drum group comes up. I feel like you're on a retirement boat.
I mean, you also, there's this other thing, like working on Carnival, all I did was read. That's when I got through the Three Musketeers, which is a long, like,
Long book. Yes.
ridiculously the prose is, it's French translated into English, translated back to French, translated into English once more. Like, it's nuts. And that's why, because you just have nothing but time to read when you're on the ocean. Reading and writing, that's what you do when you're removed from the land. So I read Thief of Time, and I enjoyed it to a point.
Yeah.
And what I'm actually going to admit, as someone who says I love the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy books, right? They are some of my favorite books. I also love the Dirk Gently stuff. So I'm not a stranger to sci-fi, fantasy-esque books. It's
Right.
not like this is the first time I ever read it or read something like that. I feel like books often struggle in those genres, specifically the science fiction genre. They struggle to find a satisfying end for the reader.
Yeah, it's hard to stick the landing. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems that writers have, in any genre, but yeah, in the sci-fi genre specifically, because you've got to pull it all together. Like something like it has to land in a sensible way, despite the fact that you've told this like nonsense story, right? And so it takes a skilled hand for sure.
Yeah. And it's one of these things, and I think one of the reasons why science fiction is such a difficult genre to stick that landing is because for the first 200 pages, let's just use that because it's what you used before, you are building a world for your reader. And you get to kind of do whatever the hell you want to do, as long as you keep it straight.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come to the end of the book and you're like, well, damn, I now need to take what I've done and end it. I need to finish what happened. I can't just keep building this world because it's a book, is not a TV show or something like that. It is a book.
Yeah. There needs to be some form of an ending here, or else you end up with an unhappy reader.
Right. So I enjoyed it, but you talk about when you challenged me to read Thief of Time, the specific thing you said was is real heady until it gets to a point where it all kind of slots together. And once that point happened, I'm like, I just want this book to be done because all of the fun of reading this has kind of gone away. And that made me a little sad.
Yeah, I am a little sad too, because I think as crazy and heady as the first half of that book is, like the back half of that book is literally the granddaughter of death, the living embodiment of time, fighting interdimensional Nazis with fistfuls of chocolate. It's not exactly like the most like stock standard ending to a book. So to find that you found it, I don't know, tedious was it was surprising.
Well, because you know what it is? It's like when you describe it the way you just described it, awesome. That is awesome. But then when you read it, and the whole time it's sort of like, isn't it crazy that we're using chocolate to fight space Nazis? It's like, you don't need to keep bringing up how crazy this is. You could just be doing it. You've been doing crazy stuff the whole book, but you keep hanging lampshades on the fact that, like, chocolate is their weakness. Simply because they've never had taste before.
I mean, if your issue is that it's a little long-winded in the back half, I don't know what to tell you, man. Terry Pratchett, the dude's so long-winded, he also adds footnotes to his long-windedness.
Yes, I mean, I'm usually not a fan for footnotes in books. I will just say that because whatever. But sometimes they work. There were moments in this book where they worked for me, but
Well,
it's not.
and that's his trademark.
Yeah,
Like legitimately, Terry Pratchett's trademark is nonsensical footnotes that go along with his nonsense writing. Yeah.
I like that. It shows that attention to detail that I just celebrated in world building.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like since he's moving towards the end, it's like, oh, I can't really go on these little tangents anymore.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
just needs to be them. It's not that his writing is tedious, it's that his writing became tedious about the same thing that was continuing to happen.
Mm.
Like his writing being tedious and long-winded, that's a boon when he's building the world because
Right.
it just helps to flesh it out. But then when he's saying three different ways that like a chocolate with a filling is going to be more effective than like a chocolate with a nut inside of it, is like, yeah, you said that 100 pages ago.
So I think one of the things that I love about exactly that is that if you look at it as a spoof on Tolkien,
And
which a
that's
lot of
exactly what I
Pratchett
said.
stuff
And
is,
that's where I was going to go, is
yeah,
that it reminds me of Tolkien, and we talk so much about it being a thin line when you're satirizing someone,
yeah, yeah,
where so I will go back to William Goldman and The Princess Bride. And the fact that his spoof on Tolkien is that the book that he's adapting that I'm currently reading goes for 100 pages describing in exquisite detail every piece of clothing that the princess is packing for her trip and exactly how she placed it in her trunk. By talking about it, it's better. By actually emulating it, it triggers that same hate pit in my mind for J.R.R. Tolkien's writing.
yeah.
And that's where it comes, and that's why. So it's that thing where it's like, I hate this about Tolkien, and I know that you're probably as a British writer trying to be like, fuck him, he's an idiot. Why did he have to say things so many different times? And I know the reason why. Because it wasn't all just written down as a solid thing. It was compiled from letters that he was sending to his son.
Right.
I understand that. So, like, as his son, it might be nice to be reminded, a month later of who somebody was.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But when I'm reading it in book form, I don't need to read a page after something happened that something happened.
Yeah, man. It's like a distant cousin to Show Don't Tell. Just keep moving forward. We don't need to stop on this point. And yeah, I can definitely see that. But I think that I think that I roll around in that shit.
And that's
like
and
that's the stuff that I love.
Right, and I get that. I mean, there's a reason why I like a Judy Blume book every once in a while. Because very rarely in a Judy Blume book does she take the time to exquisitely remind you of something that occurred like moments ago.
For sure.
Then again, maybe I won't, is the book that I'm referring to. A book that I have read just too many times because it is consumable in the way that, like, a good movie is consumable. Yeah. It's just like story. It's not like, oh, and here's a reminder that sometimes he gets stomach aches because of his anxiety. No, we're just going to have him get the stomach ache.
Right.
And that's it. So I'm happy I read it, but I'm going to admit that I'm not like ready to jump into another Terry Pratchett book right now.
Yeah. No, man. It's legit. I get that for sure.
So that's that, and I think those are the big things for me, really. I bought Uno Flip. I don't think we talked about Uno Flip, and I
don't think we've really talked about Uno much, about how much Uno we've been friggin' playing.
Yeah, so I think this might be a nice time to talk about Uno briefly, and that's the fact that coming soon,
Yup,
we will
The Say
be
Report
the
family.
Say Report family, as we lovingly call ourselves, will be streaming one of our Uno sessions, hopefully weekly. We're trying
Family
to
game
get
night.
into a
We're gonna have
meeting.
a family game night.
We're going to get into a meeting with the people from Say Report Jr. and actually plan that out.
You know, that team over there, that huge team compared to our little.
No, it doesn't change the fact that, like, we can't just say this. I want to make sure that the listener knows it's not in stone yet, but just the sheer anger and anxiety and comedy and just screaming at one another that occurs during a game of Uno with the four of us.
Yeah.
We have to start sharing it with people.
Yeah, we need to, because if we don't, we're gonna kill each other.
Yeah. Like, hopefully if there's someone there, they'll be like, you guys need to calm down just a little bit. It's just
Take a chill pill, Zach.
Take a chill pill, Devin. I was being too mean to the computer players when you and I played Uno for, let's be honest, 4 hours.
I don't know, man. Pan and Rudy they deserve that shit.
I hate them. I hate Pan and Rudy. I curse them in actual games of Uno now. Because Uno Flip, which is not available yet, but oh my god, if Uno Flip eventually becomes available with the Uno game that we play as a family digitally, I will lose my shit. Because we've only been playing like small, the most people we ever had in a game was 3 people. But last night, my mother threw a tea at our house. And that happened at tea time, 4 o'clock. And then, so what I did in order to avoid this tea, because I like a good tea, but not at my house. I like to go to like a hotel and have a high tea there, especially if it's one that's renowned for their high tea service. Tea is about being out in the world. It's not about being at home trying to recreate that. In
you know
my
how we
opinion,
were trying to figure out what your version of like baths were?
Yes.
I think this might be it.
Oh, I love a tea.
And I have no context for this.
That's understandable, and I apologize. But yeah, I love a 4 o'clock meal. Is the most Hobbit I get besides the hair on the tops of my feet. Is that a meal at 4 o'clock is lovely. And that's what tea is. It's like just a little thing to get you through the day before dinner at 8 o'clock. Because the English, they know how to eat. I'm gonna be straight with you. An 8 o'clock dinner is great. You watch Jeopardy, you feel like a genius, you eat dinner. Or you watch Jeopardy, you feel stupid, and then there's food to console you. Really,
I wouldn't know. I never feel stupid at the end of Jeopardy.
I don't either. I just wanted to make sure that, like, it works on both levels. It doesn't have to be a victory meal. Sometimes you say the wrong Virginia Woolf story in Final Jeopardy. And you're like, thank God it's mac and cheese tonight.
Oh, God. Thank the gods.
Thank God it's comfort food. And not like lobster, which then I'll have to work to liberate my dinner after feeling dumb because I misremembered the name of a book.
Yeah, food is weird, man. Like, you ever think about that? Who the hell looked at a lobster one day and was like, I'm going to eat that. I'm going to have to, like, do a lot of work to get to it, but I'm going to eat that.
So I imagine that is one of the foods that has evolved with us from when we were cavemen. Because it's just one of those things that, like, this is pretty easy to catch.
Yeah, I guess. If I stand still, it practically catches me.
It walks to me, and then I'm like, ah! And then I'm going to eat it. And it's like, and as we invented fire, we learned we could boil them. And as we got iron, like, honestly, now I feel like a science fiction writer myself. The lobster is responsible for all advancements of human society.
Unbeknownst to the rest of the world, the lobster. Oh, man. So Dev.
Yes. No, so I was in the middle of something with tea. So I went out with Zach. Zach and I had a lovely adventure where I finally got season 3 of The Simpsons. Oh. And I was able to buy dollar versions of all the American Pie movies. So I'll be extra special prepared
Excellent.
for our very special episode at the end of April. But when we got home, I didn't get home until 9 o'clock at night, and I kind of thought that the tea would be over at 9 o'clock, because usually tea is an hour long, and, you know, then people go about their day. But I walk in the house at 9 o'clock, and there are still people there, and they're playing Uno Flip.
No tea party like a deck of tea party.
The tea has gradually turned into whiskey.
Because a deck of tea party don't stop.
Deck of tea party. We went until 1 in the morning. No, that's not true. We went until midnight because Saturday Night Live was on, and I was told you need to stay up with your father to make sure he falls asleep. And I waited until he was in a deep enough sleep, and then I went to bed myself, and that was 1 o'clock. But they were playing Uno Flip at 9 o'clock, and 3 more hours of it happened. And that was at one point it got up to 8 people playing Uno Flip. And the mechanics of, like, it's only draw 1 card on the light side, but it's draw 5 cards on the dark side. You get mad at people. You get mad at someone who makes you draw 5 cards in a way that you don't get mad at someone who makes you draw 2 cards.
Oh, man.
Or even 4 cards with a wild.
It's like that moment when we were playing the other day and somebody had to draw 8, 10 cards.
Oh, gosh. That was crazy. You also love house rules. And that was the thing that I liked, was I kept pretending like the house rules were going on with the group of people, which I was pretty sober compared to the other people playing. So I got a lot of anger, like, thrown towards me for being like, that's a 7, I'll take your cards.
And you all wanted to know why I've been pushing so hard for so long for us to play this game together.
Oh, it's excellent. It's so good. But yeah, so that's the Uno detour. Sejin, it's your turn to bring us home.
Oh, man, this is so weird. So earlier this week, I decided I was going to go see Shazam because we had talked about this last week, and I did want to get it under my belt so that we could at least have a final say on it. I had a funny feeling I was going to not really enjoy myself, and lo and behold, I sat there the entire time texting you guys, being like, "Okay, what is going on here? What is happening?" Like, I felt like an old man. I got to that point where I was just like, I don't understand kids these days, I think. And so I got out of that movie feeling kind of like down. And there was this part of me that was just like, it's that weird moment that I hope everybody goes through where, like, you don't enjoy a movie, you don't enjoy a CD, you don't enjoy a video game that you thought that, I guess, like, even in the back of my head, I thought I might get a kick out of this one. And when you don't, you have that moment where you're like, do I not like movies anymore? Do I not like video games as much as I thought I did?
I cannot speak for everybody, but that is the exact crisis I went through after Shazam. It's am I done with superhero movies? Like, have I just grown out of it?
Yeah, there was a moment where I was just like, why didn't I have fun with that? Because I totally should have, and it was just really weird. And then the next day... The very next day, in fact, at the exact same time slot as the day before, in the exact same theater, there was the premiere of Hellboy that I went to, and it restored my faith in cinema, Devin.
That is awesome.
I don't know how to, I don't want to overplay this because this movie is ridiculous. Like, I want that to be on the record that I feel like I don't know if I could recommend to other people to go see this movie. You and I have talked about this, but I sat there
I have to say something. I have to say, it is insane to me that everybody I know who has seen Hellboy is like, I loved it, but I don't know if I can tell other people to go see it. It's just crazy that, like, that's how people feel about the movie.
Yeah. Well,
Continue.
because
I'm sorry.
No, and I think exactly where that feeling comes from, and I'm not surprised to hear that other people feel that way, is that it's a very selfish film, like as an audience member, not like the film itself, but it makes you feel very selfish because you're sitting there and you're enjoying and basking in it's a step above not garbage cinema, but like, what am I thinking of? Like,
B movie,
yeah, B movie. There's a specific term.
Grindhouse.
Yeah, grindhouse, I guess would be the best word. Like it's a step above that because it's not quite a
Oh,
grindhouse
you're
film, but
thinking of
definitely
like exploitation film?
exploitation, I think might be the
Yeah.
word that I was thinking of. And it is like in this weird realm of like it's happy to be gross, it's happy to be violent, it's happy to be over the top, it's happy to be weird, and so it feels like one of those things where like you don't want to share that with other people how giddy and happy that really gross thing that happened made you, right? It's almost like almost there's almost little bits of Schadenfreude throughout it when like really weird, gross, grotesque stuff happens, and you're just like, I that makes me feel good, and for all the wrong reasons. And so I think that's what it is. It is the perfect guilty pleasure movie, you know. And it's funny to me that like you're pointing out, so many people are enjoying themselves with it and having that it can it truly be a guilty pleasure. But I'll tell you, man, it still feels like one. Like it sure does feel like a guilty pleasure film. Like every step of the way was just it felt like it was a movie made for me.
Well, that's the other thing is that, first of all, I just want to drop something real quick because I want to focus on Hellboy, but I alluded to something, and you talked about searching for depth in Shazam.
Hmm.
Before we saw Hellboy, we saw Missing Link, the latest from Leica,
Oh, yeah.
and that was a movie where searching for depth is not something that I did because I was perfectly like, I'm going to take everything about this movie at face value. But the discussion about Missing Link that I had with Dale, who saw it with me, was her imparting all of this stuff that never even occurred to me. Like about characters' sexual orientation and their motivations. And I'm just like, where did that happen? So you are not alone in trying to search for depth in a movie that is shallow. I
Oh,
want you to know
yeah.
that, and I want the world to know that before I geek the fuck out on Hellboy. Because I had seen Shazam and then Missing Link, and both of them were kind of meh, to be completely honest with you. The animation in Missing Link is still top-notch Leica. The story is not. It ain't Kubo into two strings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But then I go into Hellboy, a movie that the only reason I was sort of excited to see it at the time, it's a movie that I avoided trailers on. I didn't know about the whole R rating thing that has been the driving force for some of the people I've talked to about that film and why they wanted to go see it. I knew nothing about it except for the fact that it was a reboot.
Right.
And then Zach shared that Rotten Tomatoes video that said it got a 9 on their tomato meter. And I'm like, I'm going to see this movie that critics are apparently panning because that's shitty. Like,
Yeah.
it was Rotten Tomatoes, something that we don't talk about enough that we talk about the perfect amount on this show
Yeah.
because they do
Yeah.
not deserve the cachet that they somehow have acquired. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That I feel like this could be a whole episode, so I'm biting my tongue in a couple of moments, but go nuts.
but that's all I'm saying. So like in seeing that, I'm like, well, I would like to see this movie. I'm not going to let that dissuade me. I wanted to see the movie anyway, but it's not just going to be Missing Link. We're going to find a way to see both of these movies on the 12th of April.
Hmm.
And we were able to, and it worked out for us. It was excellent.
Yeah, and just to wrap up the Rotten Tomato talk, because
Yeah.
I've got some real issues with the way that they handled themselves with this, but the critic meter has climbed a bit to 15, but the audience meter is resting at a 65, which
Which
I can
is
get.
first surprising because, as we've both said, most of the audience is like, I liked it, but don't tell anybody I liked it.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank God for anonymity in the internet.
yeah,
But that's one of those things where you say this movie felt like it was made just for me.
hmm,
The legends and the mythology that they picked from in order to construct the world of the new Hellboy is all stuff that I care about on like a molecular level.
yeah, yeah, man.
King Arthur, Baba Yaga, Yeah, those are things I love because
Yeah.
it's what I was exposed to during my formative years.
Oh, I mean, the whole fairy story of her getting stolen away and being replaced with a changeling is like one of my favorite. Like, I love it when that stuff gets touched. Torchwood did a really good fairy episode all about, and you learn about Jack back in World War One being on a train that goes through fairyland, and then they like everybody on the train dies, including him. But you know what happens in that show. But yeah, like the fairy, but the whole idea of the fairy story and the changeling, and it being this really weird coincidence and as he points out, like in the you know, there is it fate or is it coincidence? Like that whole argument literally happens, and that being echoed and emulated in that story was phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so it's crazy that everyone I've also talked to and being like, I liked it, but don't tell anyone I liked it. They're like, because I think I liked it because it was only appealing to me and my sensibilities, which to me, based on everything I've heard as reactions to this, discounting the critics who were just upset that it wasn't Hellboy 3. Let's be honest.
Mm-hmm.
That's what people, they're like, why wasn't this Guillermo del Toro again? Why is it some new guy? That's why words like unimaginative are used, which still is the worst adjective
It's
to
upsetting.
describe this film.
It's the most like it's the most whimsical movie that's come out yet so far this year.
Well, Serenity was pretty whimsical, but you didn't see that. It's a video game the whole time.
That's not whimsical.
That's not whimsy, Devin.
It's not whimsy. That's not whimsy at all.
Sorry. Sorry.
Having a weird Voldo fight with Baba Yaga. Now that was whimsical.
Yes, that was whimsical. That's a beautiful. That whole giant fight was pretty whimsical too.
Yeah,
Let's just be straight with it.
Oh man, the soundtrack. Yeah.
The soundtrack. Dude, Mexican rock you like a hurricane. Yo soy aquí.
This movie opened up with a vampire. Yeah, I forgot the entire opening of this movie was a luchador
Hellboy
vampire
in Mexico.
fight.
Yeah, like it. This felt more like the Hellboy comics than the Guillermo del Toro stuff did.
I think that if you watch the first, because we were talking about this, so I am deep in the Hellboy stuff. I mean, I always am, like straight up. I've like been considering getting the BPRD tattoo like for since as long as I've been getting tattoos. Like I love that world, you know, and everything that they did with Hellboy, and Hellboy in Hell and all that stuff has just been super like really good storytelling. And so I've been rewatching the movies. You know, I actually haven't gotten to Hellboy 2 yet, and I'm actually really excited to go watch it now after seeing this one. But I feel like the first Hellboy movie is very much a stock standard, like 3-issue Hellboy story. So there's not too much in it. There's enough to get the sense of the world. The second one is it, and it's been a while since I've seen it, but it felt at the time like a very Guillermo story of like, it was like his turn to tell his own Hellboy story. So there's a lot of stuff in it that isn't really Hellboy. It's not deep Hellboy pulls. You know, a couple of characters for sure. I forget the German guy there that he gets. What's his nuts to come play?
Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah, Seth MacFarlane comes and plays like he's, you know, like he's a really good deep pull and stuff. And so there's definitely fan stuff in it, but I do think it's very much like Guillermo having like the time of his life telling his own Hellboy story, which is beautiful. Like, I mean, there's no denying like that movie is a phenomenal like achievement for what it is, you know, as a nerd on all levels. So I don't disagree. This one feels like it is the most like Hellboy-esque in that it feels like it's a really good Hellboy arc. Not just a couple of issues, but this feels like something that I started reading in January and I finally got to finish up around my birthday, right? Like I'm so excited. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just that it feels like a really good arc. It feels like a really good couple of arcs that also had a payoff at the end.
Yeah.
Like something little that you saw in Hellboy in Mexico, which like would be the ending where he says the end is coming. It like you have that, and then you go into the whole giant thing and that whole stuff before you get into the Hell and the Fury stuff of him being Arthur's descendant and that he's going to usher in the apocalypse. It's like this is like that sort of vignette storytelling that I love about Hellboy, but then there is that connective tissue to make it one grander whole.
Right.
And I loved that. I
Hmm.
absolutely loved that. To the fact that when I think about this film, I I I do sometimes forget that the opening was him fighting a luchador vampire.
Hmm. Yeah, man. Yeah, like there's so much good stuff that happens that you forget, right? So this kind of brings me a little bit to what I was talking about, though, right? Is this idea that you had mentioned earlier in the episode, and you and I have talked off, Mike. Like the one complaint that I really have about this movie is I wish it was 20 minutes longer, but not that it had more stuff in it. That it just took its time on things like if it just lingered on shots just a little bit longer, if it let certain lines hit a little bit harder, things like that because like and again I was feeling this way about the previews even before the movie, so I almost wonder if they were like, I don't know, showing it at 95% speed or something like because I don't know, like it felt so weird because the opening story, it almost felt like Ian McShane was stepping on his own lines as he was trying to tell that opening narrative of what happened. So like there were like these weird moments where like lines kind of stumbled into each other, and I didn't have time to place a name to a character before that character was suddenly not on screen anymore or killed. Like, so like there's these weird moments, and I think it comes from the fact that they were well over 2 hours. Clearly, that they were well over 2 hours on what they had because they ended up putting out a 2 hour and 5 minute movie, and I think that legitimately they saw the writing on the wall and thought we're not going to be able to sell this film at 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I think that they cut stuff, and I think that they rushed some things, and I think there was a couple of moments that editing came in and was just like, we're gonna do what we can to get this as close to 2 hours as possible. So I feel like there was a couple of things that maybe the editing didn't really jive with what the director maybe possibly intended. There it felt like, unlike in Shazam, where we were talking about how it felt like the studio came in at the writing phase and was like, here's what we need to do to make this movie sell. With Hellboy, it felt like the studio did step in as well, but it felt like they stepped in much later. So by that point, like things had already been shot, decisions had already been made, costumes already created, all that nonsense. So really the only thing that they had any real control over was like, let's move this along. Like at the very least, let's make sure that it's a good 2 hour film that we can throw out there and put on a DVD at some point. And that's where it felt just a little disappointing for me, because I feel like if it was just a little bit slower in some moments, I think that some people that were ready to write it off right away as silly nonsense that doesn't suit them, I'd be more willing to push this movie on them, because I don't think it's silly. I think there's definitely silly elements to it, but I think it's actually a really smartly written story. I think it's a really well shot. Like I think that the art design on this movie is phenomenal. My one thing there is I wish there was more physical stuff, practical work, but that's Guillermo's bag, and so like I don't want to put this on this movie because I think they also did a really good job with the CGI that they used. So like I love so much about this movie. It's just that there were just moments where I wanted to kind of relish in the stuff that I was loving, and it was already off the screen.
So I disagree with you, and I don't want that to become like a huge fight between us. And the reason why I say
Son of a bitch.
I disagree with you is Sasha Lane is in this film. So it has been almost impossible for me not to look at Hellboy 2019 and not think of American Honey. And I'm fine with that because I absolutely loved American Honey. But American Honey is a 3-hour movie. And it is a 3-hour movie that I had no idea was 3 hours long. I sat down at 10:30 p.m. to watch that movie alone in a theater, and then it was 1:45 when I got out of the auditorium. And I was the last person in the showcase that night. I know that. There were no other humanity. It felt like the rapture had happened while I was watching that movie. And then I looked at the time and I'm like, oh God, how did 3 hours go away?
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, if I am engaged in a story and what you are giving me on screen, I want that movie to fly by. One of my favorite films is Hot Fuzz, but the first time I saw that movie, I felt like it was too long. But then once I had seen it, the second time I saw it, it flew by because I knew what the pacing was going to be.
Yeah.
And I feel like that happens a lot with Edgar Wright films. I will just admit that. But for Hellboy, when I looked at when I turned on my phone and saw what time it was and that it was almost 10 o'clock, I couldn't believe it. Because it did not feel like I had just sat in that theater for 2+ hours.
Oh yeah, man,
And
I
that's
agree. The movie doesn't drag. I'm saying it goes so fast it could have benefited from slowing down.
that's what I'm saying. But I'm saying that. So I think if it had done what you're suggesting, it may have made me personally more aware of the film, and I would have known just how much time was passing. So I think that the way that they tightened it up, and again, for me, is the way that I like to see a movie tightened up. Where it's like, we didn't need to see that guy's face for those 2 extra seconds for it to set in. Along that same line, nothing had emotional resonance with me. I did not cry. I did not like have those reactions that I get with
Right.
a more deliberately paced movie.
Right.
So that right there supports what you're saying. But and even though it supports it and thus makes it true on some level, it's not how I would have wanted that movie to go. I think
get
that
that,
they
yeah.
made the right decision to move at the pace that it moves at.
Yeah, and maybe that goes in line with the kind of like I was saying, like the grindhousey feel of what's going on. Like it takes so much. It has a lot of fun with itself, and in the fact that it's having fun with itself, it doesn't spend much time on one thing because it wants to move on to the next fun thing to put in front of you. And so like I get that, and I understand why it's like that in a weird way, which is why I think that the feeling that things were just moving too fast doesn't come from some mistake. I think that is legitimately the way the film is made, is that I don't think that it wanted you to have that emotional moment to get too close to anything because some really fucked up stuff happens in that movie, right? And it's funny because we talked about with Shazam how some really dark, gross stuff happens and it's uncomfortable, and maybe it's because it sits in it too long. You know, that whole scene in Shazam, the boardroom scene where everybody gets killed, is
Oh, you mean
unnecessary.
Dogma? Do you mean
Yeah,
Dogma?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
that's all I could think of was Dogma.
yeah.
And like I just wanted one of him to be like, a good deed, you are spared.
Yeah.
But
I
like
don't
they
know,
were
man.
trying to make him the evilest possible, so he could not have spared any of them.
Right.
But you didn't say God bless you when I sneezed. And then she gets eaten by pride. And that would have been fantastic. But like, yeah, that Shazam. I don't want to talk about Shazam ever again because
Right,
Hellboy
but
exists.
right,
Anytime
exactly.
I'm
So
going to talk about Shazam, I'm going to talk about Hellboy instead.
right. And so where I feel like that movie reveled in some really dark shit and it was uncomfortable and hard to watch, Hellboy never gives you a chance for that to happen. Like it just doesn't allow that to happen. And maybe that's a good thing. But for me, like I wanted that moment to get a little bit more attached to things. And so when things would happen, I wanted to feel a little bit more, you know. But that being said, like I'm not going to deny I love the hell out of the movie. So there you go.
There you go. I guess there's another thing I wanted to say about it that wasn't too spoilery or anything like that, and I lost it because we've been talking and having such a good time talking about Hellboy. I don't. Oh, the so one of the questions that I was asked was, is it really an R rating or do they just say fuck a couple more times?
Nope.
I would like to let everybody know, is really an R rating.
Yeah.
It is gruesome. It is unapologetic. The stuff that they do, and let's be honest, in America, we weirdly like sensationalize violence, but then don't want people to see it.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, if a movie is too violent, it gets that R rating.
Mm-hmm.
The violence that is on display in Hellboy is so satisfying and so visceral and excellent. And yes, there are some examples of swearing also being something that they're allowing themselves to do, but it's mostly with Grurach, and it made so much sense that he would say fuck every other word.
Yeah, and that makes sense, but there's definitely some over the top moments. I mean, the second word of the film is fuck.
Yeah,
like
that's
Ian
true.
McShane's opening line has the word fuck in it. So like
Well, that's
So like
because
it's
he's
like
Ian McShane.
there's making no bones about the fact that it's going to be an R-rated movie. Like I think that, but again, I think that that goes in line with what they were trying to do. You know, as much as I think that there's also really unnecessarily gross violent moments as well, like when the giants first, not the giants, but when the, I guess you'd still call them giants,
The
arise at the end.
sins? You
The
mean the
sins,
seven deadly sins?
is that
Because
what they all are?
I that's not what they all are. But having just seen the movie that shall not be named, um, all I could think was it would totally make sense if the ushering in of the apocalypse would be the seven deadly sins
Yeah,
rising up to strike down humanity.
yeah,
Because
and
you
so
have that one
there's
that's like surrounded in arms that
uh-huh.
immediately made me think of Greed from Shazam. And
Yeah.
you have that one that like is just angrily killing people, which would be Malice. But then you have the one that's just walking around like he owns the place, and the human beings that are just stuck to his spiny legs. Hi, everybody, I'm Pride.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was like some very violent moments that like felt like it didn't need to go there, but again, I was very happy that it did. So like it's all in that same vein of like of just engorging yourself on all of the stuff that you want, but you don't want to admit to anybody you want.
Exactly. And also, even with all of the violent things that we've described and the myriad other extremely violent things that occur in Hellboy, none of it was as upsetting as when a woman who is essentially an innocent, knocks on the door of the hero and is murdered.
And is murdered Raiders of the Lost Ark style, yeah.
Like, it's as if by touching the door, she was connected to the Marvel Universe for the briefest of seconds, and by an astoundingly small margin, it was the exact moment Thanos snapped, and she too disappeared as half of the universe.
We can dust people too. Shut up, DC.
Like that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
And it's like, and you care about her because we gave her, a memorable face and voice.
And backstory.
Oh, yeah. She's been looking for it for years.
This is her dissertation.
She didn't deserve to die, man.
No, not at all.
But see Hellboy. Fuck it. It seems like he doesn't want to tell people to go see it. Go see it and make your own assessment. That's what I want people to do. I want people to go out and see this movie and make an assessment. Because the humor was the humor that I like in a movie like this. The violence was that visceral stuff. I compared it to Logan, but not thinking about the fact that it didn't have the same emotional punch as Logan. But along the same line, Logan was 8 movies in the making.
Yeah. Yeah.
This was one movie that I think they were just happy to get made.
Yeah.
Honestly. And I don't know. So I do recommend Hellboy. And that's I think that's it. Do you have anything else that you wanted to add or bookmark or bookend this with?
I look forward to more Uno, sir.
Oh, of course. I look forward to more Uno as well. But until that time, if you'd like to tell me why I'm wrong about the palaces needing to be where you start when you die in Zelda 2, you can find me on Twitter at Devin D. Decker.
And if you want to give me shit about my feelings on Shazam or support me in my love of Hellboy, you can find me at Siege versus the World.
Until that time, I'd like to give it to a man who has yet to see Shazam or Hellboy and may be happier for it. William, please take us home.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Stephen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.